past, we didn't want to disturb the pitching. So we're doing this year a little differently in having pitches there. It's a nice break for everyone to come in here and listen to Gyan. So for the benefit of our international guests, I will define Gyan. Gyan is knowledge. And what you're going to be doing in these sessions is to help to share the knowledge that you have in accumulating this over many years. Our first panel, without much ado, is called Engaging with Creators. And we'd like to call upon Neil Chakravarti, Catherine Branscome, and Joan Lofts to please come on to the stage. And what we're going to request them to do is to share their engagement with creators. All of them engage with creators in wonderful and different ways. The unstoppable Avril Stark is going to tell you that this world is about no ordinary disruption, and she's going to start by becoming the CDO of the panel, which is the Chief Disruption Officer. Over to you guys.
Check. Okay, good.
Hello, hello. Got it, good.
Okay, good. Is it afternoon? Good afternoon, everyone. So in classic Brain style, he gave me about 100-second notice before this panel that I have to moderate it. So we're going to get started right away. We were originally planning to have a 3-person panel with Catherine Branscome and Joan Lofts and myself. And since I'm such a great creator person that I have spent exactly 0 hours and 0 minutes creating myself, I thought we'll have a 4th highly accomplished, creator-oriented person, Avril Stark, join us. So it's a panel of the 4 of us. And what we're doing is we're talking about engaging with creators. So I think what works best is if you wonderful folks could do a quick 30-second introduction of yourselves, just to give some context to the creators in the room, and then we start with Q&A, beginning in either direction you like or from the center.
Okay, well, I'll start. I'm Catherine Branscome. My company's based in New York City, 18 and a half years old. Not me, my company. And our core business is international distribution. That's actually global distribution because we sell into US and Canada, but around the globe. And the business has been transitioning, so we've necessarily gotten involved earlier and earlier in projects and development in order to be able to work with creators to fine-tune their content for international and global distribution.
Thank you, Catherine.
Well done. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, no, I'll try. My name is Joan Lofts. I have been in the business for too many years that I can remember. I've been in broadcasting, and I've been on the other side of broadcasting in production. I guess that the reason that you might know me, or not as the case may be, is that I had the absolute privilege of working with a little series called Peppa Pig. Now I do a lot of mentoring. I travel a fair amount. I do places like Mexico, where they have the same kind of things that you have here, but we have 3 events a year there, which is all about encouraging new talent from Mexico. I'm also a member of Cartoon Forum. I'm a chairperson for Cartoon Forum, so I do three things a year. I go to Tribon in Czech Republic and listen to pitches there. I do Cartoon Forum in September as a chairperson, and then next week, as I leave here, I go to France, to Valenciennes, and I do something called Cartoon Springboard, which is all about new and young talent.
Sydney called A Stark Production. Not A Stark Production, it's A Stark Production. Yeah, and I've been working independently for nearly 20 years in the animation industry, and I generally create shows from scratch or look for published works and look for new properties that are original and work a lot with young creators. My company has a sort of small mentorship program that runs once a month to open the door to people who need to just ask questions, really, because sometimes in the industry you're out there on your own, you don't know who to turn to, and so we recently started a program where once a month it's a first come, first served basis, and you can have a half an hour Skype call, and I try to answer as many questions as I can. And so I'm dealing with creative people from all around the world. We do many international co-productions. At the moment, we're in the 3rd season of a property that we work with Technicolor on called The Deep, which is, you know, trending around the world. We're very happy about. And that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Avril. So thanks a lot for our panelists. Just by way of introduction, my name is Neil Chakravarti. I'm not from the creative side of media. I'm more from the sort of finance, business, strategy side of it. I was a chartered accountant, an investment banker working in New York and London and Toronto, covering a lot of media companies. And then I worked briefly in India with Z as head of channels and head of global strategy. And then went back to North America and put together with some very, very esteemed colleagues, Michael Hirsch, Fred Seibert, Christian Deva, a company called Wow Unlimited. We have animation studios in Vancouver, Los Angeles. We have a big animation MCN that we run out of New York. And the head office is in Toronto. It's a public company. And I kind of am the chief operating officer of the company. So without further ado, we'll dive right in. I've just written down 5 or 6 questions since I had exactly 2 minutes advance notice, and we'll dive in with that. So first question, because it's the creator community, what do you typically look for in a creator whenever you start an interaction? So maybe Catherine, starting with you, what are some of the highlights or what are some of the standout characteristics or points of view that you look for?
I guess it's not necessarily one thing, it's a combination of a few things. So I would say something that catches my attention. So it could be the graphic design, just like, wow, visually I get drawn, something to hook me. Because if it's going to hook me, if it's the writing, the storytelling, the concept itself is like, that's an amazing idea. So it could be the idea, it could be the graphic design, but typically it's the whole. It's like how they all fit together. So if it makes sense and the creator can explain their idea and vision and have a little bit of backup materials, that's enough to want to go deeper. If you cannot, and this was someone told me several years ago, if you can't describe your show in a couple of sentences, then you probably don't know enough about what your show's about. And there's nothing more true than that. And it takes a long, long time to sometimes get to that point to make it succinct and really do your own development, do your own homework. But the main thing I would say to young creators is try to be original and not repetitive of the marketplace of what is already out there. And if it looks too much like something really famous, like if it's going to be a program with a pig in it, don't make it look like Peppa Pig or too similar to Peppa Pig, because everybody in the world knows Peppa Pig, and that probably won't be marketable. So I look for something that I feel instinctually is marketable, but instinctually isn't. It's more like research the global marketplace and just make sure that what you're trying to do, or regional marketplace, if you're going for Asian distribution or the Indian channel, if you want to. And some meetings I had this morning, the Indian, it's like we want this just for our home territory. So research carefully your home territory. So knowledge of the marketplace is really important in the reality check, that the creator has not just a great idea and a great concept and great graphics and great storytelling abilities, but also a reality check that there's going to be probably demand for this because there's nothing quite like it out there, and yet it has a appeal to the audience. So practice with your friends and with your colleagues in the industry to get their feedback and be able to listen and take in advice. That's my, like,
So
I feel that's important to have that quality to be able to listen and take in advice.
Absolutely.
As
So that's very interesting. It's like Bangalore is the hub of the startup community in India. And it's almost like you're telling people to have an elevator pitch, much like startups, where you can describe it on an elevator ride, literally, for creators who may not be familiar with it, and have a very clear differentiating element, have a hook, and if I picked it up, have a very specific demographic that you want to aim it to. Great, thank you.
Okay. I think for me, it's very much the same, really, as Catherine, just because, you know, there are so many elements when you're trying to actually research a show and find a show, and they all kind of merge into one in the end, which is, do I love this show? Do I think this is a show that can succeed? Do I think I can work with the people who are creating this show? And it's passion. For me, really, it's all about the passion. If I feel passionate about something, as I did when I first saw that little pig, you know, no one who knew that Pepper was going to be what she was and what she still is. I mean, we're talking 17 years on, which is quite amazing, really. We didn't know that. All I knew was that I'd seen something that was absolutely amazing. It was new. It was produced in a really different way. The creators were, you know, young, had not been really in the business much before, but who were prepared to work with us as almost the commercial side of Pepper, to be able to understand what we needed from them, and for me to be able to give them what they needed from us.
Thank you, Joan.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's passion as well, and it usually comes through when someone's pitching a project. I mean, before you even get to the pitch, when they really know their characters and they're talking about them as though they're their best friends. And that really is infectious, and it's something that I always, you know, engage in at a really early stage. I guess the other thing, this is just a personal thing, I kind of get very engaged in projects that have underlying heart. I mean, they all have an underlying heart, but always looking for things that are putting something into the world that's not necessarily obvious, but it has an intention that is going to bring something to the world to make it a better place, if you like. I know that's a bit soft and gooey, but that's just where I come from. And then I kind of look at, you know, how unique is it? You know, start looking behind the stories, and obviously the look of the show. Maybe the look of the show's not developed yet, so there's a lot of freedom to work with the creator to bring it to life. But if there is a sort of direction that stands out, that's really appealing and really attractive. And also, you know, sometimes creators come and they've come from a publishing world and they're not used to working in television, and I kind of really look at them and get to know them quite well, because it's really important to keep, you know, you can option a show, and some companies do that and then run off and make it. But for me, it's really important to keep the DNA of that seed that was really, you know, the first thing that inspired this idea. You know, because at the end of the day, there's nothing, and then there's an idea, and then there's an idea, and then it's a reality, and it becomes a thing. It's quite magical. But you really need to retain that DNA. So in working with creators, even if they're not experienced in the industry, I like to really make sure we don't lose that and it doesn't become a project produced by committee, you know, which I guess Pepper was very much like that. So those are the kind of things that I look for.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much. You know, when you look at India's animation community or the independent creator community, it's all very nascent. It's early stage. There isn't a very formalized training sector for it. So when you have a panel of independent creators here who really want to get better at their art or craft, how do they go about refining the tools of the trade or finding better ways to refine their skill set, because they don't have an opportunity to have a great audience like you all the time, and we want to leave enough time for Q&A, by the way, for that. But how would you recommend, given the ubiquity of the internet and everything else available, they can hone their craft or skills?
Well, there's a few ways. I would say start by watching a lot of cartoons. If you're in the animation business, just watch as much as you can, as often as you can, and start observing what you like. Just identifying, I like this show because. Just start having an awareness of what draws you into a show that you like in particular, or a few shows, or a feature, whatever it is. Just start to study animation of all types, I would say. And then I would say also start to study by reading the trades, reading the publications, so you can start to have a grasp on the backstories. A lot of times these, like Animation Magazine, AWN.com, these animation, even TBI from London, they have the Focus on Kids, C21, but start to read about animation. And then the more important, well, as important, not more important, but for me it's just easier to learn from others, and so to just keep building relationships and with respect to not picking the brains too much and bothering someone, but try to make a quid pro quo of finding those that can mentor you, and you can offer them something in return, because on-the-job training, so to speak, but actually doing is learning. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, just to try things, but to experiment. But it's ideal to be connected with people who have more experience than you do. That's how I learned. I decided to be in animation. I sort of found my true love in the entertainment business because I started with live action movies distribution, and I migrated. It's a long story, but I won't tell you about, but because of people, because these Canadian producers, they were so nice. They were so much nicer than the movie people. There's good people in the movie business too, but really, and it's just true, I feel at home with the animation community worldwide. The people have the same. So you already are 5 steps ahead of the game from where I was, and just keep nurturing relationships and learning from others. I think that's a great way to learn.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
I think also don't be afraid, really, to make friendships with your peers in the industry, because. And don't think that you have to do everything alone, because actually, if you are a writer, what you need to do is to find a really nice, friendly director, maybe, and find a really nice producer, perhaps, who you can kind of group with to work on your project with you. I mean, very often in these kinds of territories, it happens in Mexico, which is where I do a fair amount of work. You know, you have lone people in their homes creating, and really what they need to do is actually just get together with other creators and form a little group and maybe work together on something. That's what I would really advise.
Actually, I'm just going to pick up on that, because can you hear me? Is this
Yes.
working?
Yeah, I think
yeah, you know, I think what Catherine was saying is, you know, if you can find a mentor, it's always really nice. And I've been very lucky in my life. I've had a couple of fabulous mentors. I didn't draw on them too much, but they were always there. But one of the things that happened early on, and to go to Joan's point, was looking at the peers. And we actually started a group of us. We were very inexperienced. We were actually all producers. And we felt like we were alone in the world. And we didn't want to feel like we were in Australia, which is a small territory. So it's a small industry. People are competing for a very few slots. But we didn't feel in competition with one another, because we were all developing very different shows. So we started a lunch club called the Squeeze Mores, because we wanted to squeeze more out of life, squeeze more out of our brains, squeeze more out of our budgets, and squeeze blood out of a stone. So the deal was that the second Tuesday of every month we'd meet in a dirt cheap restaurant, because we were all very poor, so we could all afford a pizza. There were 8 of us. And the deal was we'd invite someone to join us for lunch, and we'd all chip in and pay for that person's lunch. So we'd invite a distributor or an artist or a director or even one of the broadcasters. And over a period of a year or so, word got out, and people wanted to be invited to our lunch, and we didn't really know what we were doing. But we would get them to talk to us, and then we would just have a nice lunch. And it developed a relationship. We helped one another. We had questions like, oh, how have you done this? How have you done that? And we would share that, and we felt like we had this little community. Now we've all grown up a bit, but we still remember the Squeeze Mores. And so it's actually not a bad thing to get together with people who are starting out, even if you're from different studios and you're a bit further on. Come together more often. Don't wait just for these big conferences. Form your own thing, And the other thing, and I can only go on my own experience, I just threw myself at people, really. I really did. I mentioned this at the last conference. I was coming to England and I kept bringing ITV, and I had a book property. And I said, I'd like to come and pitch it, and I kept being told, no, he's very busy. Then I resorted to bribery, and then I got a meeting, and it was nothing.
Are you going to tell us what you bribed her with?
I think I bribed the assistant with duty-free perfume, but anyway, it's another story. But always be nice to people's assistants, because they are actually the people that run the show. But the thing was, I got the meeting. I was really nervous. I didn't really know what I was doing. But what I did love was this story, and the broadcaster spent an hour with me and gave me lots of input, and I went back and I took all of that on board. So basically I just kept throwing myself at people until they got to know who I was, and hope some of them didn't run the other way. But you've got to be a little bit bold, just be fearless, is, I guess, my
Fantastic,
advice.
thank you. One of the things that I noted being new in the animation business, I wanted to learn the evolution of animation over the decades, etc. One of the things, and this is a bit self-serving, but one of the things that helped me is a shorts program that we have at Frederator. It's a shorts program that has been run for 20 years with great networks like Cartoon or Nick or Hanna-Barbera or Google, and it's called the Frederator Shorts Program. And over 20 years, there's just so much documentation on Wikipedia and YouTube about each of these programs, and the 250 or 60 shorts that we've created, and the 15 or 16 series that have been created about it, that it was a great kaleidoscope of how, whether it's character development or how the storylines have evolved over time, how stories from the 60s and 70s are different from how they are today. So I found that to be a great online resource in sort of learning. One of the related questions I have, and Joan, you were talking about Mexico, is that, and this just struck me while you were talking about it, the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, traditional bastions of great shows have always had thriving communities in this space. Where outside of these countries, call it in the emerging world, are you seeing great communities of independent creators grow and thrive? Love to learn some highlights from each country, maybe Mexico, how that's evolving, any takeaways for the community here, any learnings for the community here.
You know what? It's such a privilege to be able to do the stuff that I'm doing, just because I'm really passionate about this industry. I love animation, and to be able to continue to do what I'm doing in different territories and bring these territories into, if you like, the international marketplace, that is my goal, really. And I guess that is you guys' goal here, and that's why I really like being here as well. The thing is that when I started in Mexico, it was actually how I was describing it. And you had this group of people who came, we call it boot camp, which is great because it is boot camp and it is learning and it is about, inviting people who are in the international marketplace, in America, in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, to come and actually teach, which is absolutely marvelous, and it works really well. So when I first started going there, it was lone people. It was, you know, these young people who happened to be a writer or happened to be a designer or happened to be learning about animation, who were coming to this event and learning. And what's happened as a result of that is exactly what I was talking about to you, is that they have come together now in groups and they understand a lot better that the world that they occupy, not only in Mexico, which has no money, but also something of the international marketplace as well. And the result of that is that some people who have come have actually, including myself, have tucked projects under their wing and are now actually helping to develop projects from that territory, come to fruition and come to the marketplace. And it is marvelous.
Fantastic. Avril, Catherine, any thoughts to share from other countries that?
Well, I could say that I was around in the fairly early days of the same parallel development, but very much supported in Brazil by their government. And I'm not precise about when it exactly started. I would guess 10 to 12 years ago, where prior to that, there really was not an independent animation industry. The government really helped kickstart it in Brazil, and then later, maybe 5 or 6 years later, it really took off when the government imposed quotas for Brazilian content. So I think my company, we were introduced through a dubbing studio in New York to an animation studio that's now one of the top in the whole country, one of the oldest. They migrated to animation from the games industry, and they've started their own festival. They joined with 2 other people, the creator-director, Ale Mercado, from 44 Tunes, and my company had the privilege, I would say, and honor to make Brazil-U.S. television history by taking one of their early series. It was 39 episodes of 7 minutes each, and then shaping them, because that wasn't enough content for the international market at that time, which is now about 7 years ago. It wasn't enough content for the international channels, and I feel I really got lucky. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So a buyer who liked the character designs and liked the series, it was completed, but we formatted it into 3 shows in a half-hour block, because that's what would work in the United States, is half-hour block. You can't place 7-minute episodes. It doesn't fit. So we did that. Stars Kids and Family bought it, and so U.S. cable satellite channel, and it made U.S. Brazilian television history. In the U.S. could care less, but in Brazil, that was huge news, because they'd never had a fully financed, out of Brazil, original creation out of Brazil, their talent, their money, their designs, their stories, their scripts, everything was Brazilian, but then, of course, dubbed into English and premiering on a U.S. network. We had a big cocktail party at Kids Screen when Kids Screen was still in New York. And government officials came and so on. So for 15 minutes, my company was famous. Andy Warhol's 15 Minutes of Fame, we've had it. But still, that was very exciting, and the excitement that the government and the consular general came from, it was really exciting. And so I've seen, since then, I've met so many more Brazilians, and their passion and excitement, passion, as you guys have mentioned, so important. But the talent is there, and it's everywhere. Actually, the talent's here in this room. So it's probably you're 4 or 5 years behind Brazil, I would say, roughly. And it's really important, the government support. I can't emphasize it enough, because that's really what gives you an advantage to grow yourselves and your industry together. So I think that is a great support. So I really
Fantastic.
appreciate
Yeah.
being a guest here and having the
Yeah.
government support
Absolutely.
to help share these stories of inspiration and actual, it can and does happen and will. I know it will.
Fantastic. Those are two great examples. Just when I was listening to your Brazilian bit, the one thing that I noticed this morning and may be appropriate to discuss, this is my last question, we'll open it up for Q&A, but this may be helpful for everyone, is local versus global. A lot of creators, and this is, I'm just meeting, have a perspective that, oh, I'm making this show for a global audience. Is there such a thing as a global audience? Because in my sort of low-level understanding, a 5 to 9-year-old in America or Canada thinks differently from one in even Britain or Australia. How do you, or does it travel well across different geographies? If people are thinking of making shows for a global audience, what are the hallmarks that travel well within a global audience when they think about it? Or should they target it more for their local milieu and then see how that goes outside? I just find, and I'm new to it, so I'm just getting perspectives from these creators, but sometimes it's confusing to position it for a global audience because I can't see how an American kid can relate to this show.
Actually, I think about this quite a lot, because in Australia we're quite a small territory, and our Australian broadcasters keep saying we need our local children to retain their culture. And so there's particular things. Recently they've asked only to have Australian voices and things like that. And it's a question that comes up a lot. One of the things I think that makes something global is not necessarily the look or feel. There's certain universal themes that appeal to children around the world. Every child starts school, for instance, has a first day at school. Doesn't matter what country you're in. Well, most countries have a first day at school. There's certain things that appeal to children, and I guess if that's woven into stories, that's global. Then the extra layer of that is how that happens in a particular territory, and you can play with that a little bit. But I once saw a little ad, it was years ago, and I think it was Teresa Plummer Andrews who pointed it out. She was at the BBC for a long time, and there was a little cartoon, and it was a tree and this little stick figure, and he was like this. And it goes, I'm feeling global. I'm not feeling anything. I'm just feeling global. And the point of that was really that once you make everything too global, you lose everything. You don't have a specific identity. So I guess the key is to have a universal theme that all children can understand and then play with that.
And is that both in the preschool and the sort of 8 to 12 space, or is it?
I would think more in the preschool space because they're having more, and I think then it starts to depart a little bit because different countries, I know in Germany, they tend to play things a little bit younger than we do in the 8 to 12 space. We're going a lot further and they're pulling it back. So I think it's pretty much for preschool, that would be a good rule. And there are certain universal themes for teenagers and older kids. They all want independence, So I guess if you can take those and mould them, that's just one thought.
It's useful. Catherine, Joan, any additional thoughts? Or
I would just say that one thing that could make it too localized is if it's based on too many cultural references that are unique to your home territory, no matter if it's India, Brazil, Mexico. But if you look at, here's an inspiration, look at Coco, the feature Coco. So I think it was even a surprise for the studio that made it, I would watch that movie 10 times to just get that connection between their local culture, but the universal themes and the characters outweighed the cultural references, but it could have been just the other way around. They were really on the edge, I feel, but they just surpassed, and I think it's a real study in success with universal conquering local themes, but it was dicey, and I think they were, I don't know, yeah, they were shocked.
They were. Watch the film. If you haven't seen it, watch it, because it's a masterpiece. It's a beautiful piece of photography. It's a great story, and it'll just give you a clue, I think. I think you're so right, Catherine. It'll give you a clue as to what actually does work from a global perspective. And I think really the word global is a bit of a nonsense, sorry, because actually it isn't about, but global doesn't describe in any way whatsoever what it is that would make something successful in a number of territories. And it's the things that both these lovely ladies were just talking about.
Fantastic. Well, that's very helpful. Do we have 2 minutes for questions, please? We'll take a few questions. Any questions from the audience? I guess not. They're so enthralled. They're trying to absorb it all in. And there is a question here. Right here on the third row, please. Do you have a mic? Thank you.
There's a prize for questions.
Yeah. No one told you that. Secret prize for questions. Your mic's not on. Go ahead.
So music plays a huge role in localizing or globalizing the content. You talked about Coco movie, and I was wondering ki Indian music can be very much global. So I just wanted to know the role of music, which is, we talk about visuals, all these conferences, and I think we lose the focus on the music and the other local aspect that makes movie rooted. As well as I think our music has all the properties, all the qualities that can take it to every other country. So I just wanted to hear about music, Coco's music, or any music for that matter. So.
Okay, I'll do this one for a minute. I'm working on a series at the moment, which is a preschool series with a Mexican studio. And so what we're trying to do in that series is, because the idea and the creation is from Mexico, but too many cultural references would probably make it not appropriate for the rest of the world. What we're trying to do is to actually give it a Mexican reference. And so, for example, the music for the show will be about mariachi, because mariachi is such a big part of Mexican culture and Mexican music. You know, in terms of the title of the show, which I can't tell you at the moment, but there will be a Mexican reference to that. And so it's not, it's not about taking away from the show anything that might give it that reference point. It's about trying to, if you like, compromise in a sense that gives it some of what it wants, but not all of what it wants, if that makes any sense.
Okay, thanks. And other thing that I understood is like you should have a diverse audience at the animatic stage or the preview stage to understand the global qualities. Because you talked about it might work locally, might not work to other countries, other genders. So does that make sense? Taking the movie on the pre-production stage to different people from different countries, different ages.
I think the question
Is your question at what stage should I take a movie to?
From the opinion point of view, where should we get the opinion? Because I think for us at the animatic stage, the movie can be told. Right? At the animatic stage, movie can be conveyed to the point, right?
The narrative
can be conveyed. So at that stage, the opinion from many perspectives can help the film to reach a global audience. Will that help? Or
so are you saying, is it good to get opinions or feedback
from different diverse audiences?
From diverse audiences at the animatic stage? Is that your question?
Yeah, that's my question.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously at the animatic stage, if you're talking about music, because often you probably cut your animatics to a bit of music to give it an atmosphere and a pace and all of that. So certainly, I think if you were looking at some territories, like a handful, not too many, because too many cooks in the pot, again, ruins the curry.
Nice local flavoring.
Yeah. But certainly, I think at animatic stage, if you've got a really good animatic and you want to show that and you want to put some of the music in there and get a sense of that, I would be selective and show maybe 2, 3 or 4 key territories and just see what sort of feedback you get. Yeah.
Fantastic. Any other questions? Okay, if not, panelists, thank you so very much for your time. Fantastic answers. Thank you very much.